Welcome to The Point Sports Report. I'm Ryan. I'm back here today with Michael and Marcus. Guys, can you say parody? I mean, wow, what a weekend. This opening weekend was just crazy. The SEC went 7-7, 6-6 out of conference. They did have a conference matchup, so we can't really count one of those. But just crazy that we saw that so many marginal teams this opening weekend. Marcus, I'm going to let you take it away here. What are your thoughts from the weekend?
You know, when I think about how the games played out last week, it makes me question how rankings are done. I'm not saying that the process is flawed. I have a hard time wanting to rank people in preseason, and even in the first week is difficult. Tennessee was ranked top 10, and they went into overtime with Appalachian State. That one, just shows me how awful preseason rankings are. Then you look at LSU. They lose to LSU number 5, lose to unranked Wisconsin. Oklahoma number 3, losing to number 15 Houston. Clemson number 2, struggling to unranked Auburn. I mean, preseason polls are a little difficult for me. Like you said, the SEC had a rough week, a very rough week. And for being the quote-unquote best conference in college football, they didn't fare too well. And a few of their teams struggled against not-so-great teams. However, some of the games played against higher-ranked opponents or, typically better opponents, they did well. The ones who played against weaker opponents actually seemed to struggle. That's my take on this. The biggest game to me, I think, over the last week was either Houston over Oklahoma, which was a great game, or Texas over Notre Dame. Those two games messed with college football playoffs already, but made for a great opening college weekend.
Yeah, we finished that up even with another great game, Florida State and Ole Miss. But no, you're right there on when you hit it talking about the SEC and are they that top dog? And I think we've seen that over the last 2 years. Even though maybe the number 1 or 2 team in that conference is right there at the top, the rest of the league is kind of falling off, and we're starting to see a resurgence from the ACC, the Pac-12, and the Big Ten of sorts. And yeah, okay, you can mention the Big 12 is in there as well, but there's conferences that are definitely becoming better, and I think the Big Ten is one of those conferences to watch out for. Michael, what did you take from this weekend?
In a number of just amazing games, I think the one team that really stood out to me that I watched was Alabama. I mean, oh my gosh, they have a super athletic quarterback. Their defense was phenomenal. I thought that USC could maybe hang with them for 3 quarters. It didn't really last that long. Jalen, is it Hurts, Alabama's quarterback? The guy, he's just a beast. Florida State, I was super impressed with. They really bounced back after Jameis Winston's halftime speech. They're not going to have that every week, but, I was really impressed because Ole Miss was absolutely dominating that game. I'm really surprised, as Marcus alluded to, the rankings this week, not just a sense that the preseason ones are kind of flawed, but I'm not surprised that Houston moved up as far as, they're now 6 in the polls. I'm a little bit surprised that Texas is 11 and Wisconsin's 10. Don't get me wrong, Wisconsin absolutely manhandled LSU, but on further review, LSU's been struggling for the last year and a half. All they can do is run the ball. They're a very one-dimensional team, and to only win that game by 2 points, look, it was an impressive victory simply because not a lot of people expected Wisconsin to win, but for only a 2-point victory for them to go from unranked to 10, I find very surprising, and for Texas to only have a 3-point victory against Notre Dame, which they very easily could have lost, they move all the way up to 11, so I still think the rankings are a little bit fluid, but I guess I, at the same time, like how fluid they are because I think in years past they've been very stagnant. So I'll give the voters credit, but I also think that they're a little bit strange still because there's almost too much movement, and I still don't know what to think.
Yeah, rankings are very tough early in the season, especially in the preseason, as you mentioned, Marcus. It's really hard to rank these teams that you don't know a lot about or how they're going to come out and how they're going to regroup. when you look at these preseason rankings though, and then how they do week 1 or 2, it's going to play itself out, and these teams are going to move. Marcus, I think you wanted to throw something else in there.
Yeah, you mentioned Big Ten had a good week. I just wanted to point out in the rankings in the To The Point Sports Report Top 25, we placed 5 Big Ten teams in the top 10. Now, if you look at the quote unquote official rankings, the AP, we all know how we feel about the AP. They had 3 teams in the top 10, and the coaches had 4 of their teams in the top 10. So to me, it seems like the Big Ten is the most dominant conference in the league at this point. Now they're gonna, beat up on each other. It's gonna get ugly. But based on these rankings, based on what we've seen, I feel like the Big Ten might be the top dog right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. And speaking of those rankings, you can see those rankings on our website, and it is a blind ranking. So all of our experts submit a poll, and then it is tallied out, and the rankings are made from that. But the rankings are still very accurate as well, including 24, I believe, of 25 of the teams that are in the coaches poll, just maybe in a little bit different of a spot. This last weekend, going into the weekend on our podcast, we talked about a lot of these games, and honestly, we didn't do too well on a lot of them. We said Alabama would win. I believe I said Alabama would win big, and I was right there. But a lot of these other games, it's just there's too much we didn't know. Now that we have film on them and we've seen these teams play, we'll be better in the long haul, knowing how these teams are going to do, and we'll be able, I can promise we'll pick more precisely. I mean, we'll pick better, but actually, the only person that I know that picked that Wisconsin LSU game correctly was Aaron Rodgers on game day. I don't know if anyone else picked Wisconsin to win that game, but congrats to Aaron Rodgers. He did a very good job there.
I think he had a little bit of bias on that one.
Well, it's where he lives and all the people around him love it. But hey, it turned out to be a good pick.
Yeah.
So last week we did some upset picks, and Marcus, you did a really good job. You picked Eastern Washington to beat Washington State, and that's back-to-back years now that Washington State has lost a season opener to an FCS 1AA opponent. I went out and picked 3 upset alerts. I picked BYU over Arizona in a neutral site down at the Glendale, Arizona, with the site of the Fiesta Bowl. BYU snuck out of that with a 2-point win. I also picked Western Michigan over Northwestern. Crazy play in the end zone at the end of the game. A fumble that Western Michigan guy decides to throw back in. Luckily, he was out of bounds first. Western Michigan did pull off the upset over Northwestern on the road. And the other one was an early one in conference of the SEC. I picked South Carolina over Vanderbilt, and South Carolina did pull that win over Vanderbilt. The only one here that was not right was Michael. Michael picked Missouri over West Virginia, but hey, Michael, don't worry. You got plenty more weeks to pick someone.
Yeah, that's what they say to losers, to give them that little, consolation. But right, I'm third best on the panel, so that's a bronze medal, right? Is that? I'm taking it as a bronze.
It is a bronze medal. Olympics are over, but I kept one for you.
Yeah, my picks weren't too good, but definitely looking forward to more weeks to come. This week's matchups aren't as juicy as they were last week, but as we get into conference play, I think we're going to see some really exciting football again.
Speaking of this week's matchups, let's just jump right into it. First one we got up is North Carolina State playing at East Carolina. Marcus, how about you start us off?
North Carolina State, they had a great game. Their new transfer quarterback, Ryan Finley, came from Boise State. He had an amazing game for the little time that he played. Did a great job. East Carolina, they've been on the up and up. North Carolina State, they've also, been rising in the ACC a little bit. I think this is going to be a really good matchup. Knowing how good Ryan Finley can be, I do think North Carolina State has a good shot at winning this. But I do want to say I think ECU has got this one.
Yeah, it's agree with Ryan Finley. We've seen a lot of tape on him, and for North Carolina State to have him as their quarterback, I definitely think he had some work to do as a Boise State quarterback, and we're very happy for him that he has another opportunity to start. East Carolina is one of those teams every year that has they just play really hard-nosed football. I know football is a very physical sport, but they seem to give teams a lot of trouble, a lot of big-time conference teams trouble. They beat Virginia Tech last year in a rain-soaked game. And I think they're going to give North Carolina State all they can handle and then some.
This is the first meeting since 2013. The Pirates have won the last two. North Carolina State, as we've said, has the Boise State transfer as well as an offensive coordinator who switched over there. East Carolina, on the other hand, has Minnesota quarterback Philip Nelson, who left after, I believe, 2 years playing off and on at Minnesota. As I look at this game, I give the edge in this to North Carolina State because of Coach Dave Doran. I think when you look through offense, defense, special teams, it's pretty much neutral, straight down the board. So I look to Coach Dave Doran, and he gets the edge. North Carolina State wins this game, in my opinion, 38-31. Moving down to the next game, we got Utah State versus USC. I'll start us off right here. USC's coming off that embarrassing loss we talked about. Juju Schuster, the wide receiver at USC, had one catch for 9 years. He's a Blitnikoff candidate, and I mean he can be a threat. But he was non-existent in that Alabama game. Max Brown got sacked 3 times against Alabama. If he can have time in the pocket, if they can keep him up, then Utah State needs to watch out. Utah State, on the other hand, last week was the first game actually ever televised, college football game ever televised, streamed on Twitter. That's just a little fun bit for you guys. But Kent Myers is their quarterback, and Devontae Mays is their running back, 213 yards and 18 carries. As I look through, I think USC has the advantage almost in all aspects of this game. I expect USC to win 45-33, but I would not be surprised if that hangover from last week continues.
Utah State, they've had their on and off years lately. They look phenomenal some games, and then they look like, an FCS team another game. Last year, we saw them create an ungodly amount of turnovers against Boise State to pull off a win. But I don't think they have what it takes to beat USC. USC, like you said, had an embarrassing loss. Granted, it was against the number 1 team, but no one wants to lose that badly. So I think USC is going to come out saying, hey, look, we mean something in this league. We're going to show that we mean something in this league, and we're going to make some noise. So I think they're going to come out firing. I think Utah State's going to have a rough time keeping up with them. They could pull off an upset, but I believe USC has got this one. I mean, I was wrong a lot last week, but I feel pretty certain about this one.
Yeah, Utah State's quarterback, he's a dual threat, but he threw 100 yards against Weber State. I'm not exactly sure that's going to cut it against USC. USC is going to be a very motivated team. They obviously had a very tough loss against Alabama, but they did compete, and I just don't think they have they're just not quite there depth-wise to compete with the big boys just yet. This will be a nice game for USC at home. I'm not exactly sure they'll fill the Coliseum, but they should win this game by at least 2 touchdowns.
Michael, what about Arkansas versus TCU at TCU?
Gosh, my first thought is that this is going to be a lower scoring game than expected. Arkansas, great at the running back position, great offensive line. The Hogs, they are the Razorbacks. But they got some big boys, the big beef up front. I really think that they're going to give TCU a lot of trouble. TCU struggled last week and was actually losing in their game to an FCS opponent. And I really believe that Arkansas will just, to be quite honest, I think they're going to run the ball down their throat. I think TCU is not as experienced as they've been in years past. And I think Arkansas is really going to take advantage of having a solid running game. I do think that Arkansas will win this game. I'll say that they win by a touchdown. But this will be closely contested. But I believe it will be played at Arkansas's tempo.
The last time these two teams played each other was 1991. It's been a while. Arkansas holds the overall margin of victory as far as wins go by a long shot, but things have changed dramatically in the last 25 years since they last played. TCU has had many great seasons roped in a row. They had a little bit of a falter last year. Still a great season. Arkansas, they've struggled a lot lately in the SEC. Last year, they went 8-5, which was a better season for them than they have had consistently the last few years. So I think Arkansas is starting to figure things out. They, were ranked third in their division last season behind Ole Miss and Alabama, two very strong teams. So I think Arkansas is starting to figure things out. I'm going to disagree with Michael here, and I think TCU is going to put a game together. I do believe it'll be close, but I do think TCU is going to put a game together and come out on top against Arkansas and get things back on track, having beaten an SEC team.
A lot of good information there from both of you. Arkansas struggled last week and won by one, I believe, over La Tech. And TCU, as Michael said, pulled away late against South Dakota State, winning 59-41. Arkansas needs to be able to run the ball here to have any chance to score points. Kenny Hill, on the other hand, for TCU, played well last week, but definitely still can play better. I agree with you, Marcus. TCU at home will find a way. And as I'm looking at my score prediction, I'm now even wondering if I give too much credit to Arkansas, but I'll stick with it. TCU wins 44-34.
Another game, Washington State, Boise State. Washington State coming off back-to-back opening season losses versus FCS opponents. This is a big game for them. If they can win it, gets them back on track, and it could be a huge statement game. Marcus, what are your thoughts?
Boise State versus Washington State. Boise State has played Washington State 4 times and has never won. That doesn't look good for Boise State fans. However, the last time they played was back in 2001 when Dan Hawkins was the coach. They were starting to get things figured out. Their first 2 times playing them was their second and third year as Division 1A football program. So within 5 years, they played 4 times, losing all 4 times. Boise State has dramatically improved since then, so it's a completely different ball game. Washington State, they struggled. I didn't want them to lose because that helps Boise State look better when they hopefully beat Washington State, but I also felt good being right about my upset alert. But Washington State struggled. Eastern Washington is a great FCS school, but Washington State should have handled them. Their quarterback threw, I believe, for over 400 yards. Boise State has had a lot of issues going on with their defensive backfield. They get one of their starting safeties back this upcoming game. Hopefully that'll keep from having issues. I was very impressed with their young defensive backs, Boise State's young defensive backs this last game. So it could be good. I think it'll be a intense throwing match between the two teams. I do believe that Boise State will come on top. They're playing on the blue in Boise, and it's hard for anyone to come in there and play. And I believe that Boise State will come out on top. Brett Rippon is a phenomenal quarterback. He is young, but he's got things figured out. He's got an amazing cast to go with him. Very impressed with junior wide receiver transfer Cedric Wilson, giving Brett Rippon a second tremendous target other than Thomas Spurbeck. And then Jeremy McNichols in the backfield is just tremendous. 3 touchdowns, I believe, in the first half, and didn't play a ton in the second half. It's going to be rough for Washington State to go in for Boise State's home opener. I believe that Boise State is going to win, I don't want to say big, but I think it'll be, my prediction is about 38-17. So 3 touchdown win. That might be aiming a little high, but based on how Boise State looked in their first week, yes, against a weaker team, but they looked amazing, and I give them 3 touchdowns on this one.
Yeah, in our first podcast, I was like, yeah, Washington State, they're going to give Boise State all this trouble. Looking back on that was kind of a bad comment. Eastern Washington is a great school in FCS. They can put up points. If you remember, they gave Washington a few years ago all they could handle and then some. And, I really believe that this is going to be a much tougher game. The line that I've seen a few lines that are out there. I'm seeing some at 12 points. That's really tough because I could easily see Boise State winning by at least 2 touchdowns. Their defense looks so good on the road. I was really impressed with them in that regard. I will say this. I do think Washington State is going to cover, but it's going to be a situation where Boise State's up by 17 and they give up a late touchdown in garbage time and they ultimately win by 10 points. I think it will be I think Boise State will control this game. But gosh, this is still a scary game to me, The biggest improvements are made between week 1 and week 2. So Mike Leach, Washington State's capable of putting up points, but I was just so impressed with Boise State's defense that I think it's going to be very difficult. And ultimately, Boise State will win the game by 10 points, giving up a touchdown late in garbage time.
Sophomore Boise State quarterback Brett Rippon, nephew of Washington State standout and Redskins Super Bowl MVP Mark Rippon, but he looked very good. It's interesting that he's going to be he left Washington to get kind of out of the shadow of his uncle, but he looked very good. I think BSU left off right where they ended last year's season in the bowl game against Northern Illinois. They looked very good, as you said, on defense and very powerful and dangerous on offense. Wazoo has lost back-to-back season openers against FCS opponents, like we said. Luke Falk still looked very good, 41 of 51 for 418 yards and 4 touchdowns. Boise State defensive line is going to have to get pressure on Luke Falk, and if he can do that, I think they can cause him into some issues, some turnovers. Whoever makes, I think, 2 big plays on defense, whether it's a 3-and-out or a turnover, probably wins this game because I don't see a lot of defense coming from Washington State in this game. Boise State wins this. I agree with you, Marcus. Probably about 3 touchdowns. I had the score 52-31.
Wow, I'll take that.
We have 2 games now, BYU and Utah. This is a fun one for Marcus. Marcus is a huge Cosmo the Cougar fan. Oh, wait, sorry. No, I forgot. No, you're not. I'm just kidding. No, I know he's not. So I'll do a quick little bit here, and I'll send it off to Marcus. So BYU won 18-16 over Arizona, as I said earlier, on a game-winning field goal by true freshman Jake Oldrod. I believe if I said that right.
Oldroyd.
Utah beats Oldroyd. Okay, thank you. Utah beat Southern Utah 24-0. I think Utah is the better team. It definitely has a better coach. They might not have better playing experience at quarterback, but Utah wins this game. It always is close. Now that I say that, watch it not be close. But I'm going to say Utah wins this game 34-27, 34-31, something in that range.
Yeah, I mean, Cosmo the Cougar, he does some pretty amazing stunts. As I was a student down there, I went to a few volleyball games and gymnastics and whatnot. Always athletic. So I'm a fan of him, just not necessarily their football team. So yes, I went to BYU. No, I'm not a Utah Utes fan, but I had a bitter taste in my mouth for BYU athletics, mostly their fans as I was down there. Nothing against any of our listeners. I love you all. You're great. I just saw some things that I didn't love. Now, let's get back to the actual rivalry. This is the Holy War. Historically powerful teams out of Utah. Historically, Utah holds the lead in the series 55-31 with 4 ties. And Utah is currently on a 5-game win streak. The last one coming in the Las Vegas Bowl by 7 last season. They were not scheduled to play last year. They had a 2-year hiatus. But the way it fell, BYU played Utah in the Vegas Bowl, And I think a lot of people were upset about that, but a lot of people loved it at the same time. Ryan, you are very right. The game is typically close. 4 games ago, Utah did crush BYU in Provo, 54-10. But typically, it's pretty close. I watched a pump-up video for the Holy War this weekend, and I can't remember who was talking, but they said in the 7 years that they were at BYU, all but 2 of those years came down to a last-minute play. I remember a couple years ago, BYU missed a last-second field goal hitting the uprights. A lot of people joked that it had crossed over midnight into Sunday, and because BYU is a Mormon school and they don't believe in playing on Sundays, they were punished by kicking a field goal on Sunday, and they missed it. Just kind of a funny little side note. But this is a gross, bitter rivalry that can get very, very vicious. Both teams will claim that the other is dirty. I've seen a lot of BYU plays be very dirty, including against Boise State last year, and then the brawl with Memphis the year before that. But this is going to be, at least for me, someone who lived in that rivalry, it's going to be a fun game to watch. People in the Idaho, Utah, maybe even Arizona area might get a kick out of it. It's going to be fun. Utah, like I said, holds the advantage. It's in Salt Lake this year, I believe, which gives them an extra advantage. BYU has a new coach. He seems like he's a great guy, and everything. So I think BYU is going to come out firing. Taysom Hill, he played very, very cautiously in their game against Arizona. I think he was afraid to get hit, which is not good from your quarterback, especially when Taysom Hill is usually one to initiate the contact. Might have been first game jitters back from his season-ending injury. So I'll give him a little bit, give him the benefit of the doubt. And if he does struggle, they got a pretty solid backup quarterback. I go with Utah. They do have a more established coach. He's been there longer. He's been a head coach longer. I believe both of these coaches have been at the other program at one point in their careers as well. So there's a little bit of fun there. Utah, I believe, had to replace their quarterback and their running back, but they're always good for producing players. And just like any rivalry, you don't know what's going to happen. But I go with Utah on this one, mostly because it's at home and they've won the last 5 against them.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to take Utah at home, but I think this is going to be a much tougher game than I hate to say it's going to be a much tougher game. It's always a really hard-nosed football game, but I give the edge to Utah simply because it's at home. But the line, some of the lines I'm seeing is 3.5 points. I actually think that BYU will actually cover. I think this is only a 3-point win for Utah with a field goal late.
Last game before we do some upset alerts, we got Virginia Tech playing Tennessee. This is a neutral site. It's going to be the largest venue ever for a college football game, playing out at a NASCAR venue. Michael, you're smiling big time here. So, Michael, you're going to start us off.
Well,
Michael, are you smiling because of the NASCAR or because it's Tennessee?
No, because, Tennessee, you guys just have to understand something about the South. Maybe it's just already understood that racing is a really big deal down here. So it's Bristol, baby. That's what people say. So it's I hear it on commercials, on the radio and whatnot, and people are just obsessed with their racing. So I think this will be a really neat venue for the game. The game itself, oh my gosh. I mean, Tennessee really struggled last week against Appalachian State. Ironically, the offensive and defensive coordinator that were on Michigan's staff when Appalachian State won are both currently on staff at Tennessee. So maybe we're not totally surprised that they gave Tennessee a tough time. But I do believe that Tennessee should win this game. I think they'll bounce back, but I'm a little surprised to see Butch Jones on the Saturday football preview shows. I mean, dude, you should be back in Knoxville looking at tape. Like, I get that that's maybe something built into his contract, but I was like, what the hell are you doing, man? Like, they struggled big time. I think there's a lot of jitters for that team. There's a lot of expectations, but if they can't get through Virginia Tech, it's not going to look very good for the Vols the rest of the season. I do expect them to win. I think they'll win maybe by 10 points, but I think it's going to be another ugly game, to be honest.
The last 2 games these teams have played have actually been at neutral sites. The last one in 2009, they played in Atlanta. The one before that was way back in '94 in Gainesville, Florida. And they've alternated who's won. Virginia Tech, they've had on and off seasons. Tennessee, you heard my opinion on Tennessee last week and a little bit earlier this week. This one's tough for me. Virginia Tech hasn't, necessarily proven themselves too amazing, whereas Tennessee, in my opinion, has had a history of that. With the way things are going, Tennessee had a rough game. They're going to come off firing. Virginia Tech also played at FCS school, and they struggled a little bit. I guess Tennessee didn't play at FCS school. Excuse me, but Virginia Tech did, and they struggled a little bit, but pulled off a pretty decent win. I think this is going to be one of the toss-up games that I struggle picking with. For kicks, I'm going to pick Virginia Tech. Sorry, Michael. I just have
okay.
I have this thing that I don't like picking SEC
I don't blame
teams to
you.
win.
I don't blame you.
I do believe that Tennessee probably will win, probably between 3 points to 10 points, but I got to go with Virginia Tech on this one.
Tennessee looked marginal at best last week, got pushed around up front on both O and D, and that's what's surprising, and that's what's concerning if you're a Tennessee fan. Got to solve that, got to just bounce back, be ready for this week. I mean, it's not like it's a bad bounce back. You won the game still, but just bounce back and get ready for this game, and I take Tennessee here by, as kind of what you said, 10 points, but I'm going to say 32-20. So that pretty much wraps up our preview of the week. Only thing we have left are to do some upset picks, upset alerts, as we did last week. We'll start off with the guy who didn't get it right last week, Michael.
Akron.
Redemption
Akron
time.
is a 24-point dog against Wisconsin, and I think that they could lose by 3 touchdowns. So I'm going to go with Akron.
I love how you say they're going to lose still by 3 touchdowns. You're not picking them to win. You're not making it, close. They'll just lose by 3 touchdowns. I love the pick.
It's a sarcastic pick because you're basically picking a team to still get kind of crushed. But I'm going with the Zips. Go Zips.
Zap the Zips, as we used to say when we watched them play back in the day. We were watching Navy play Akron when we were back in Maryland, and they were saying zap the Zips. So, Marcus, we're going to move to you now that Michael has just told himself that he's going to go 0-2 in the first 2 weeks in upset alerts.
Yeah, this week I really wanted to pick Jacksonville State over LSU just because, SEC struggled this last week. The FCS teams they played gave them a good run for their money. The FCS teams, actually played fairly well against Power 5 conferences this last week. I want to say 3 FCS teams beat a Power 5 conference team. I could be wrong on that, but I think that's accurate. But I'm actually going to go with UNLV over UCLA, not just because there's 4 letters in each name, but because I do feel like UCLA is going to hang their heads. I know I've been saying that, this team got beat and they're going to come back firing, but I do think UCLA is pretty disappointed in their loss. They should have won that game against Texas A&M, and they didn't. Their quarterback, he played a great game. They just couldn't close. And I think UCLA is gonna be a little slow trying to, pick things back up. With that, the Runnin' Rebels from UNLV are gonna be firing. They get a great shot against a good team, and a great school, great program. I believe this one is down at UCLA, so that gives them a little bit of advantage. But I do think UNLV is going to find a way to make it a game. I'm going to call this one an upset, and it's not going to be by much, but I'll give it to UNLV. We'll see. I was right last week, but that was, in my opinion, a little bit easier of a pick. But I think UNLV, they've got a good shot at winning this game against a sad, upset UCLA team.
Wow, gutsy pick. I'm gonna just tell our fans right now. I'm taking UCLA 47-24. Just throwing it out there. Just throwing it out there. I'm gonna stay in the same conference though, and I'm gonna take two games here. I already mentioned one earlier. Utah State's 15.5-point dogs. I picked them to lose by 12. I think they have the ability to lose by less than 2 touchdowns, or maybe even win the game. Now that I said that, watch them lose by 28. But I think Utah State can do enough to hang in the game against USC. And the other one is California against San Diego State. San Diego State's favored by 7. Last year, Cal beat up on San Diego State 35-7, I believe the final was. I understand Goff was there. But Cal has had an extra week. They played Hawaii, and they didn't play this last weekend, and now they're playing San Diego State. San Diego State did look pretty good against New Hampshire, but it was a 1AA opponent, and I'm going to give the edge to California having a bye week and just having better athletes across the board. So those are our upset picks. We've got Akron against Wisconsin. We've got UNLV against UCLA, Utah State against USC, and Cal against San Diego State. Thanks for listening, guys. We really appreciate you guys coming in and tuning in. Michael, Marcus, thanks for joining me. Enjoy the rest of your week, and let's get ready for some more football this Saturday.
Sounds good, man.
Sounds good.